waiting for that.
Okay.
So I can probably just go through some of the practice like this week. So this week went by really fast, because we were just basically, most of my work week was just, getting stuff ready for release. And so I missed formal practice on Friday. But other than that, I did like sit for the formal practice for the rest of the week. And then last time, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday, we briefly talked about, paying more attention to how things change all the time. Because, last time where we left off was, everything was one big Dhamma. Nothing is really in control because everybody's bumping into everybody else. So we have this whole mass of jiggling particles. And so generosity practice, I haven't really seen any I haven't run into any homeless people this week. However, I try to do it in other ways. I treat my families my family to lunch, where I just pay for pick up the tab, for food. So that's how I try to practice generosity there. Read, portions of Sutta 10. And I guess the question that I have there is, so there's a portion where the Buddha talks about knowing when consciousness arises and ceases, but what exactly is the consciousness that he is talking about? How can I be there and watch the consciousness cease, right? Because what I had in mind was I'm not conscious when I'm sleeping, so is he pointing to the fact that I'm watching it slip when I sleep on the bed?
Okay. Let's talk about it now in the sense that we have to define consciousness correctly.
Okay.
All right. And that we actually have two different uses for the word consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But if we take it to its broadest context, then consciousness is all over the place. For instance, the trees are conscious of the wind because they sway in the breeze. The leaves are also conscious of the sunlight and they turn in that direction.
Oh.
Also, the light switch, when you flip the light switch, it's smart enough to turn on the electricity.
I see.
Through a cause-effect relationship. This is actually means consciousness at one particular level, at the basic level, is the ability to respond.
Oh, I see. It's just
all right.
Respond. Okay.
So now let's look at it at a bit higher level, and that is the kind of consciousness that's associated with the sense organs. So that you have eye consciousness and ear consciousness. All right. Now, eye consciousness is actually quite complex, but normally with just the eyes, what the eye sees, and is quite excellent at doing this at a very defined detail level, is to see shapes, colors, and movement.
Right.
Shapes, colors, and movement. And we're very good at detecting motion and movement. That's what the really interesting part about the eyes are, is that we focus in on, if there's only one thing that's moving in the entire scenery, then we'll focus immediately right on that which is moving.
Right.
Okay, but that's all that the seeing does. And that information, that bare bones information, is then fed into a processing unit that we're going to call perception. And that perception is going to be using a lot of information off an old hard drive that we've been storing all the crap on. It needs defragmentation, it needs cleaning out, it's got duplicates of this, that, and the other thing, and it winds up being also gunked up with feeling.
I see.
So when we take that stuff off the hard drive, not only do we take information about how to process this new sight that's been seen, but it also will drag up a little bit of memory stuff also. And what we want is we want to stop processing with the old stuff and have our new processing done that's very clean.
I see.
So that the actual process that we go through would be very much like then another kind of perception. And this new kind of perception is a different kind of seeing. For instance, I can see the tree, but I can also see what you mean. This is what we can also think of as conception or conceiving things.
I see. Okay.
And the word sieve here is actually a word that has to do with sight. Okay, so conception or conceiving of things means that we're making an internal representation of that which is on the outside. All right. In the Pali language, this thing is called salayatana. And the salayatana, the word atana, it means the actual sense organs themselves, but the salayatana means the internal representation of those. So everything that we perceive, or let us say, everything that we become conscious of, everything that we can conceive of with the eyes, then is processed to make an internal representation. That internal representation then is what is now our consciousness of the outside world that also is influenced by our memory systems, our maps, and so it depends upon how hard that new salayatana is how hard it hits us, how much impact there is. That is not the outside world that impacts us. It's the internal representation. Our understanding is what impacts us.
Oh, okay. I understand now. So basically, it's like, the difference between, okay, I'm looking at a photo and, I don't know, like me, like younger, and then there's a part of me that says, hey, like this bunch of shapes, that was me when I was 1. That mental model is the consciousness that we're talking about here. Oh, okay. Actually, this is an interesting segue. So, is this what the Zen masters refer to as like, every moment is fresh? Like when they finally kind of tone down the internal model, they see like everything like really new. Every moment is like new to them because like
everything is new.
Right, truly, right.
It truly, really is new. Every moment is brand new based upon the causes and conditions that are happening right now. And the human is the one who tries to bring the past in to say, oh, no, it's like there was in the past. No, it's not like it was in the past.
Oh, right. Because it's like, like, I guess, like, so this is probably the example, right? Like, for example, like our cells in the body, like our body is actually constantly dying and like new cells are being replaced, but we kind of slap an abstraction and say like, oh no, this is the body. Like the body has always.
It's always been here, exactly, and it has not always been here. It's constantly in flux. Everything is constantly in change and turmoil, and it's only our delusion of sameness.
So does that mean that when he talks about watching for the arising of consciousness, that means like I'm basically gonna try and catch like when I try to recognize things? Is that like kind of what?
There's something else to look for. All right. And that is the relationship between consciousness and perception.
Oh.
All right. And how we're going to do that is by the quality of taking an object. This is an important concept because if you, like, for instance, you're just gazing, but you see something move, then you immediately are drawn, your attention is drawn to that thing that moved, and we start to analyze that to figure out what it is that moved. That analyzation and figuring out what it is that moved, that's what we call perception.
Right. Okay.
All right. And that is possibly going to give 4 or 5 different impressions onto the salayatana, but it keeps going back trying to make new impressions because it hasn't quite figured it out. We're curious.
Right.
All right. So now you can see that process. But what we're going to do is we're going to start thinking about looking around, like walking down the streets of New York without taking any object.
Oh. Okay. Without taking any
Walking
object.
down the street without taking any object at all, because any object that you take will distract you from being in the here now. Literally takes you off the track of the Dhamma, the track of be here now. So it's a distraction.
Whoa.
So if you walk down the street and all of a sudden you feel that you've got gum on the bottom of your shoe, you know what that feels like, and that becomes a kind of a distraction, right? And so every step you take is a little bit of gum that's going to be sticking for a few steps. All right, so think about that gum on the shoe with everything that catches your attention. Any object that you start looking at long enough to try to catch it or to perceive it or to take a note of it. And what you're going to be doing instead is recognizing that that's what you're doing. You start experimenting with this intentionally so that every time the mind takes an object and you recognize that it's just taking an object, you move it to something else. And you keep it free floating, trying to keep it away from any objects at all so that you're really in the here now.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. But what about but what about the breath itself? So what I do now is.
But that's part of the thing that will bring attention. So we should be actually, while we're breathing in and out, we can take that into consideration as well as the breeze, as well as the eye. So we kind of put all of the senses together. So that we move back and forth between one consciousness to the other. Because while the time that you breathe, your consciousness can move to eyes, to ears, back to the breath, back to the nose, back to all over the place. Because it's free floating now. It's not registering anywhere. It keeps moving and moving and moving because there's so much to a verb.
Okay. So basically, just to summarize, when I catch myself trying to, I guess, interpret something interpret the perception, basically try to stop it, stop it and then just do something like look at something else or just take in something else, perceive something.
Move on. Yes, a better word would be to move on.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, that's really cool.
But that's exactly what we've been doing right from the get-go, is when the mind wanders away from the breath and we remember it and we move on. We come out of that. It's the same practice, except that now it is a much deeper level of practice.
Okay, got it. So, for example, so I'm just trying to get the hang of this. So let's say I'm walking and the breeze comes in. So I can feel the breeze, but immediately what's happening now is it will be like, oh, nice, like a nice summer breeze. So that happens really fast. Does that count as me basically, I guess, interpreting the feeling on my skin, saying, yep.
Start to congratulate yourself. You're in the here now. You cannot feel last month's breeze on the arm.
Oh, okay. So it's more like I can feel and label it, but it's not like, just don't spend too much time trying to analyze it or compare it, right?
Right, because that takes us out of the here now, is to grab an object and to beat on it for a while so that we get full understanding of it, and we've lost so much. Right. The better thing to do is just to keep watching, keep looking. Don't take an object to analyze.
Gotcha. Oh, that sounds kind of fun. Okay. Yeah, because there's plenty of stuff, right? Like if I'm walking, left footstep, right footstep, it changes so fast.
There are just tens of millions of things happening every second. There is no possibility for you to take in anything or everything, but you can take in a whole lot more when you stop trying to take in one thing to suss it out. We stop sussing and just watch.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, okay. That sounds like something fun to play around with. Yeah, so I guess I talk about practice. Yeah, it seems like the Zen master has kind of gotten left forgotten now. Or when I tell him to hey, you don't want to touch. I've also sometimes forgotten to remind him. But when I tell him hey, if you turn on the TV, turn off the TV. Sometimes he's like, oh, nothing's really happening. He's feeling fine, so he's not really practicing. So he, I guess, like kind of backslid like a little bit. But it's interesting.
Oh no, it sounds to me like that he's really getting some Dhamma. That he
Oh,
really, through the back door, the way that
oh,
you've been operating it, he's actually getting some of it really
oh,
correctly.
oh, really? Oh, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. But it's interesting though because it's like, so on one hand, sometimes, he's still, like all the verbal stuff, the rest of my family, doesn't like it because of all the verbal stuff he says. It's interesting though, but because, um, how do I say this? It's like, um, it's I see like it. I feel like it's kind of like a play where like you have an antagonist, and that kind of unites everybody against the antagonist. So in some sense, I guess like this role is, I guess there's a purpose for the role. I guess it unites everybody else against the antagonist. So I was like, oh, this is just like I guess like an observation. Yeah, not really anything substantial there, but I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
So you would say that your family has then put your dad in that position of being the odd man out, the
I feel like
the antagonist?
yeah, I think my other, my other like family members, me not so well. Me, I don't like try to emphasize that because the whole point is, like if you further do that, that's like a vicious cycle. Right? You don't. I mean, if you treat him as an antagonist, of course he's gonna play. Like, he's gonna end up
Exactly. And so what the whole family was doing was working so that it was spiraling downhill further and further.
Right.
Like this, just spiraling down, and everybody. But now you've made a change so that he's picking up.
I sure hope so.
Oh, I'm sure of it. And the family will start to treat him a little better because he's treating them a little better.
Right. Right.
And so now he can start unwinding all of that stuff that he had gotten himself into, as you were saying, possibly by being overly jealous of his of the other side of the family.
Right. So it's
And
like,
so getting out of that jealousy and he's not good enough and starting to feel good about himself now, and he'll be much easier for your family to live with.
yeah, so I think he definitely is a constant reminder to practice. So what I've also been doing, I've been playing with the door opening when we stand up or sit down. Those
Yes.
are surprisingly fun to play with because it's like the mind needs a little bit more time to really get the message, especially the door turning one, because it's just like boom, you just like sometimes you think about it. Wait, like we were supposed to be mindful. That's really fun because it's like the most mindless one for me is like door slamming. The chair one is like sitting down. Definitely when I stand up, and sitting down is easier to remember than standing up because when you sit down, your muscles relax and that already instantly triggers. Then like you pay attention, like let's reach for the remote, and they're like wait, you can't get it.
Exactly so. That's why I give these exercises out, is because these are wake up calls. Look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Why are you getting up out of your chair?
Right? I was like, wow. Yeah, so these are actually surprisingly fun to play around with. And that's actually basically what I've been doing like this week. Yeah, I'm just trying to think like what else I missed. Yeah, other than that, it's pretty much like these couple of things, and then everything else is like really busy, planning, the moving things, all that stuff. And I was like, oh my god. So I was like, yeah, this is like another Dhamma lesson, right? Like the more stuff you have, it's like, oh my god, like there's actually so much like things involved. I'm like, man, should I just stay put? Some part of it. But yeah, not much else, at least here. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a really good report. I'm glad to hear that you're getting some benefit out of the standing and especially the door opening.
Oh, definitely.
What a wake up call.
Yeah, because I just mindlessly open and close some doors. There's also one I've been playing with in the morning, which is So the Zen master is a very light sleeper, very, very light sleeper. And even if you, um, you know, like out of 10 steps, 9 steps, you're very quiet. And the last one has a tiny creak, he'll get up and he'll just like get up. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was like, okay, so, can I just walk around without like getting him like to wake up? That's really like, that one's also a really high bar because you have to move very deliberately or else you just wake him up.
Here's a way to break that. There's another way to do it.
Uh-huh.
And that is as you're walking down the hall, before that last creak happens, you want to actually call out, "Good morning, Dad."
Oh my gosh, yes.
In Chinese, you just say, "Hi, Dad. I'm really glad to see you up this morning."
Oh my God, yeah. So I should probably try that too. Yeah, I should try that too. Exactly. Yeah.
But that puts the joy in it, you see.
Right. Yeah, because it's
Before you were trying to avoid suffering, here's the easy way to avoid suffering is make it a big joke. "Hi, Dad. I know you're up."
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like in the morning, definitely, when I wake up, my mindfulness is the weakest, because like the mind is just like getting, because the mind wants to sleep a little bit more, but you gotta get up at 7. But definitely it's the weakest in the morning. So the Zen master has a thing. Way back when we were really young, like he made this rule that we had to say good morning, and he would. There were sometimes, particularly bad days, where he would flip out if we didn't say good morning. And once we said good morning, it wasn't enough to just say good morning. You had to say good morning, comma, Dad. And there were a couple of times where we said good morning, and he just flipped out because he said it was like.
No, you got to do right. Whatever his little rule is, you do it 110%.
Yeah.
Good morning, Dad.
So I think one interesting thing maybe to play around with is sometimes I'll be honest, if you make rules like that, you gotta say it like this. Like nobody wants to do something like that, like because it's not organic. You just forcing it. It's kind of like you go up to someone and say you have to respect me, but that's not how it works, right? So I guess something interesting is maybe I could try saying it like as if I really meant it with a smile. That's definitely a good. Good one. So I guess that's also another mindfulness. In fact, that's a very strong reminder for mindfulness in the morning. So I guess that's something else I can play with. So many things to play with, and so much time.
Well, all we have is now. Everybody's got the same amount of time, which is 0, right there in the middle of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, so the 2 suttas that you gave me are very interesting. So I feel like there's like a lot in there. I guess the second point I found interesting was the bodily like contemplations where the sutta talks. One of the suttas talks about like the monks going out to look at like dead bodies and like just watch them decay. That sounds really hardcore. Like that sounds really hardcore. Like they just sit. Like how does it work? Like they just like sit next. Like they just sit and just look at it. Because I remember you had told me way back like a year ago. There used to be a video where the monks would be shown like the video of the body opened up and they just look at it. And the purpose of that is to understand that. I guess like to break the attachment to the body. Like is that what kind of the purpose is?
Literally, if you are there in the autopsy room when a dead body is first cut open, many people will lose consciousness, they will faint, they will become nauseous, want to throw up. All kinds of things will happen because of their reaction to the repulsiveness of this thing. But the surgeon, the autopsy teacher who's teaching these students and cutting this body open, he's getting off on the fact that he can actually stand there and cut this body open where his whole audience is in shock. So the autopsy doctor winds up being the lion. I can do this. I can cut this body open. I can look at what really is there without getting squeamish.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I see. So is there any use? So sometimes I remember this is maybe 2, 3 years ago before we had lessons. I remember, there were always meditations on, I guess, like the repulsiveness, of the body, or like meditation on death, like that everybody eventually just like dies. Everything is. So are these also something like things also worth like playing around with? Because I feel like like there's. I mean, there's like a whole.
Yes, playing around with is the right word, and playing around with these toys.
Okay, gotcha.
But we're going to be playing with these toys in a really serious way. An example would be, how far is the closest morgue?
Oh God.
Or why don't you go to a morgue?
Oh my God. A morgue?
Yes, if that's too much for you, then go to a cemetery.
Oh man.
And walk through the whole cemetery.
Oh yeah, like sometimes, I mean, when we go like the ancestral rites, and sometimes we have like the ancestral rites there. I guess like that's when we go to the cemetery. That probably happens maybe like two times a year. Maybe 2 times a year. Yeah, I mean I guess that's when we go, but it's like upstate. It's like an hour drive like away.
Okay.
Yeah.
But listen to the end of my sentence. At night.
That's dude, my parents would be like, I mean, even I'm like, that
but what are you afraid of? What's to fear?
That's a good, I mean, oh man. Yeah, that's spooky.
What is there to fear?
Yeah, I mean, now that I think about it, yeah.
All your enemies who live in that cemetery are not living, they're dead. They can't hurt you. Only you can hurt you.
Oh man. Maybe like what I'll do is I'll come over here and then you can just walk me through the cemetery once. If you were right by my side, I was like, okay, I can. Oh, yeah.
And I imagine that if you look on YouTube, there should be an autopsy movie or video or two. You just type in autopsy into YouTube and let's see what they can come up with. I haven't done it. Maybe I should if I'm talking about it to students.
No, but I think you bring up a very interesting point, right? Because when you ask me, like, what is there to fear, like, walking through a cemetery at night, there are still, like, I pause and look at the mind, right? There are still, I guess, vestiges of, like, fear against, like, the supernatural, or, like, what my parents had told me, right? Or, like, things that, stories that you, like, read online, or there's always, like, a portion of the mind that says, okay, like, there may be something that's undiscovered that you haven't seen before that might actually, like, be there, like, things like that. I think that's...
Well, maybe that's true, but what are the chances, since nobody's seen that in the past 10,000 years, that it happens to just occur just at the time when you're walking through that particular cemetery? Check your odds. That's the whole point, is we got to get out of that reptilian brain that is operating in the mode of self-preservation.
I see.
And get into the frontal lobe, the thinking mind, to recognize there is no danger in a cemetery.
I see. I see.
That the dead don't harm people.
Right. No, that's definitely, wow, okay. I see. Whoa, that's kind of, yeah, that's intense. Maybe I should actually just come visit you and have you walk me through. Yeah, I should do that.
Well, let me ask you this question. After you're dead, who are you going to haunt?
I mean, nah, I'm just going to sit there. I'm a very lazy person.
Right, you're not going to... Well, guess what? Almost everyone who is dead just does not have the energy left to go haunting. Doesn't happen often.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe I should come visit you or something. I should probably do that.
We don't have any cemeteries, but we can take you to all of these stupas that have all of this ash in it.
Stupid.
But
Yeah.
ash is not nearly as terrifying as zombies walking around. That's the terrifying stuff for us Western boys.
Okay. It's interesting though because I feel like what if like the culture was changed? Like like the Chinese have like they have like strong things about yes.
Oh, I know. I've seen Hopping Ghost. I know the Hopping Ghost.
Yeah. So I'm like, but I think you're right. Like it's true though. It's like interesting. That also raised like like some more like cultural like stuff like more old data on the hard drive. I see. Okay.
Well, now here's a way of looking at it. Children, all children. When you were a kid, when I was a kid, we loved to play with toys. We invented a magical world. And in fact, the whole quality of Disney is that they continue to create that magical world for children. It's only the children's movies that do all of that kind of magical world, but it's that same mentality that Disney does now with Marvel. But they're doing the same kind of magic, but in here, instead of being an artistic magic that they did 50 years ago for those kids, now they're doing it with computers. But none of it is real. But the children love it. Just like the little car that the guy has. The little kid has his car go zoom, 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 and in his mind, it's a real car. In reality, it's a toy.
Right.
Okay, so when you get that, then what that means is that as we grow up, we fail to make distinctions between what's real and what's imaginary.
Right.
So those ghosts were imaginary stories for childhood, but your dad still believes in them.
I see.
Because he didn't grow out of that. He's not using the frontal cortex of his mind to recognize there are no hopping ghosts in downtown Manhattan. Hasn't been one in the newspaper for many, many years now.
The only ones are the soulless bankers walking around on Wall Street, right?
Yeah, the dead men walking are not quite dead yet. If they're really dead, they're not walking.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I guess what I'll do is I'll just keep practicing what we've been talking about because I feel like it's great because sometimes when I sweep the floor, that's an opportunity to practice, right? I pay attention to the left stroke when it's the left stroke or the right stroke, upstroke or the downstroke. When I'm walking, like basically everything I can. As long as I remember, then I will practice basically.
And so now you're going to also start to practice to open things up, to not take on any particular object. Okay. Then instead of watching the leg rise and fall and rise and fall, now you're just watching both of them kind of as a fluid motion while you're taking in kind of everything else too.
Okay. Gotcha.
And so we're expanding our awareness. Here's an idea that you can think of like that when you're in that state of open awareness, where you're not perceiving or latching on to anything, it's extremely difficult for somebody to sneak up on you.
Oh, because you're so highly aware of everything.
Because you're highly aware of all kinds of stuff. So, and nothing is registering, but if someone comes up, they'll register. To where in normal situation, people are thinking and they're curious and they're looking at this and that and they're distracted. So when somebody sneaks up behind them, they get really surprised.
Oh, that's interesting because I guess, it's definitely like a polar opposite of, what I sometimes do, which is, when I'm doing something, I focus on that thing. Sometimes
you're very good at that. You're a computer scientist, but that's not what we need right now.
Right.
We need to focus on nothing rather than focusing on something. Now that you know how to focus on something, stop doing it and focus on nothing in particular.
Okay. So, All right, so it's kind of like everything, right? Like kind of like right that feeling of like zoom out on everything. That's the feeling. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And it is a marvelous feeling to be in the Dhamma, to be in the soup.
I see. Huh. Okay, let me try that tomorrow. And I'll
All
report back
right.
tomorrow.
Okay, we'll see you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye bye, Willie. Bye
Bye.
bye.
All right, thank you. Bye.